first would just love to have you share your name, who you are, and a little bit of your story, if you can do that.
Sure. So my name is Robert Von Goeben. I am an entrepreneur and an investor for the past 30 plus years. I live in Portland, Oregon. I cut my teeth in technology and entertainment industry. I originally was in the record industry as a technology person. As a result of that, got pulled into Silicon Valley in the early dot-com era in 1996, and I was a venture capitalist through the late 90s and early O's, which was a crazy ride, as you can imagine. Profitable, fun, and incredibly stressful. Got out of it in the early 2003 or 4 and stumbled into the toy industry. Myself and some product people decided to start a company called Green Toys. Long story short, we started in a garage with our own money. 5 years later, we were exporting to 80 countries and had over 2,000 customers in the United States, and got so crazy and successful that my partner and I looked at each other 5 years later, decided to sell the company. We sold it to a private equity firm. I retired, and now I help and invest in consumer products companies in Portland, Oregon.
Great. And so, you and I have chatted a lot. And so I'd love for you to share some of the struggles of, you've been very successful. You an investor, the toy company, you selling that. But in those successes, there was some hard times. There were some struggles. And I'd love, if you could share some of those with the audience.
Yeah. Everybody's journey in life and in business hits struggles that are very different and very specific to the person. For me, the biggest thing that I caught up against is I fucked up. I was incredibly confident in what I was doing and in managing other people and things like that. But when it got to an issue, either in a venture capitalist, in an investment, in a relationship in the entertainment industry, in a product issue, in the toy industry, the bottom line is I made a bad decision. I fucked up. And that's what would just kill me. It was, if the shit hit the fan, I would be okay. I'm generally pretty good in a crisis unless it was something of my making. And then the stress and just the guilt would come in. And that was a killer for me. Seeing, why did I do this? How did I get myself in this situation? How can I get out of this situation? And that was the biggest struggle for me. And of course, that was really hard in venture capital because you have tens of millions of someone else's dollars that you're the steward of, which I took very seriously, and it was incredibly stressful.
Okay. Yeah. I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that as well, especially those that are building teams, building a business. They put a lot of pressure on themselves, a ton of pressure. Is there a specific instance that you can remember that sort of shit, I fucked up situation really getting to you, what that looked like, and maybe how that affected your mental health in that period of your business, your career?
Yeah, there was a couple of times. When I was an early venture capitalist, there was this idea that venture capital is an incredibly risky business, right? Mm-hmm. And you're really taking risks on these incredibly unproven companies, specifically around the late 90s where it was all kind of wacky, Mm-hmm. And so you had to be really risk tolerant in order to go into this. And the challenge was I was working with other people's money. So this idea that I would put money in a company and it didn't work out would have an incredible effect for me in playing Monday morning quarterback. Say, what didn't I see? What happened? I would really stress out. Now, a lot of people are really freaked out by external things like this thing happened. Why does this happen to me? That kind of thing. With me, I took it all personally. I came from a super blue collar background and not a very wealthy background. So, and my parents, see, it's generational. My parents were Depression era German people. And their idea was you work harder, everything's within your control, you push rocks up a hill. right?
Yep.
That
Yep.
was how I was trained by my parents. So this idea that the only difference in success and failure is what I do. It's like 100% manifest destiny. And as a result, if you fail, it's 100% how you fucked up, right?
Yeah.
And no one else would say that. It actually didn't even matter whether anybody else said it. It was my own. It could be incredibly debilitating. And once you get over this, I can take risks. Things will fuck up, but I'll be okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm not hurting other people. People make mistakes.
Yeah.
Over the years, I'm now 57. I've gotten comfortable making mistakes, and that's very hard when you're younger.
Yeah. Was there anything that you've done throughout your career that has led you to be able to be more okay with that? So I'm sure earlier in your career, some of those mistakes, those quote unquote fuck ups, you took much more personally than you do now. Was there anything that you did over the last, however many years to get to that point? Was there anything that was it a mindset shift? Was it an actual strategy that you'd use? Can you share how you've gotten to that point?
There was a couple of things. One is just straight miles under the wheels. It's
Mm-hmm.
pattern recognition, which is, I'm a very imperfect person. So when you make mistakes over and over again, and you do it with purity of heart, and you're not doing anything illegal or hurting people or anything like that, you realize that the mistakes you can get over.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world. So what happens is it's just taking all the way through. The old thing about anxiety training is play it out in your
Mm-hmm.
mind, right? Okay, so this is really bad. Where does this play it all the way to the end? And when you play it all the way to the end, you realize the worst thing that's going to happen is I'm going to lose $10,000 or something, right?
Yep.
It doesn't seem so bad. The other thing that happened around in my 40s, my early 40s, I said, I've got to improve my health. So I started to work out. I started to, smoke less pot, drink less beer, as I went through the company. And the idea of just having more clarity and feeling stronger physically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, as you get older, and this is actually, I've heard true from my mentors who are now in their 70s, is you just don't give a shit anymore, right? Stuff just doesn't bother you because you've seen so much. And so for any younger entrepreneur, I would say, just have some patience and realize that, as someone said to me once, the first time you get sued, it's incredibly traumatic. The second time, it's just a pain in the ass. Right?
I think that's really interesting with the miles under the wheels. It's something that I don't have a ton of miles yet under my wheels. And so, I do take a lot of things personally. I do put a lot of pressure on myself, going from last year at this time, not even having a business, to today having 18 team members that I'm supporting their livelihood and these clients that are relying on me. And I put a lot of pressure on myself. And I think a lot of other entrepreneurs do as well. So that's important to think about that.
Well, and I would say also, everybody thinks they're so special.
Yep.
Most people are. There's no doubt about it. They're unique and they're special. But most people think my situation is so special. What I have is a unique stress that no one has ever overcome before, right? Boy, it's really hard climbing, Mount Whitney, the highest mountain in the United States. It's so hard. My experience is unique, and you forget that tens of thousands of people do it every year. Mm-hmm. So the reality is when you look at your situation, and actually what helped me, one thing I forgot to say, one thing that helped me a lot was mentors that were older than I was, who went through and basically said, yeah, I've seen this sucks. Here's what happens. Here's how it plays out. And if it crashes and burns, here's what happens, right? Mm-hmm. And unless you're doing stuff that's incredibly stupid, you're not going to go to jail, hurt anyone else, all those kinds of, as long as you can pass those tests, and you can have, but really the best thing in life in general is relationships. And I think what happens is relationships go, and that's what I'm trying to do now in my new business, Starter Fluid, which is mentor and invest in entrepreneurs, because I had great mentors when I was younger, and they guided me through this, and it's just my turn.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I know with the toy company, again, you and I have talked about some of the struggles there and some of the some of the mental health obstacles that you and your partner sort of experienced during the stress of that, building that big company, selling it, some of the potential post-exit depression, I think is the language that you used.
Yeah.
Can you share some of the, you built this company, exporting to 80 different countries, very successful, selling it. But can you share, a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we hear some of these success stories and we forget that there are people on the other end of those success stories that experience struggles along the way. So with Green Toys, can you share some of the struggles along the way of building that business and selling it?
Sure. This kind of boils down to this idea of entrepreneurs who are a very driven lot. Everything is in extremes, right? Everything lives on both ends of the spectrum. For us, myself and my partner, we were funding the company ourselves, which meant not only do we put our own money in, but because we were a physical products company, we needed a line of credit to build product to sell because toys are a very Q4 driven business. So we had our houses as collateral against the business loans. Banks are not a particularly risk-loving lot. So, we had our houses up, and that was an incredible amount of stress. So my partner and I said, okay, we're done. And let's sell the company. It's at a great point. Let's not try to, pull more. Let's one in the hand. So we sold the company. And then I said, I'm just going to drink beer by the pool for the rest of my life. So what happened is I went from here to here. It was extremes. And so what happens is this company, which I love, this Green Toys company, which was, eco-friendly, US made toys. It was a real mission. I used to say, you can find online a Chase TV commercial that we did where I opened the commercial by saying, we don't call this our company, we call this our mission, which is actually what we believe. Now you take that and you remove that from your life completely, purposefully. And I still think it was a good decision for me personally, but this idea of not taper down,
yeah,
this idea, this concentration in business and in entrepreneurship, which comes from Silicon Valley, of exits. This whole idea of you get into something and you're 100% focused on how it ends, right? It isn't about the journey. It isn't about what you're going to go through. It's just about exit, how you end. And it isn't always so rosy when you exit. Even if you did like I did, you exited, you made a lot of money, you never had to work again, that's its own struggle, right? So one of the things I would love for the study of entrepreneurship to focus on is to focus less on this idea of exit and more on this idea of journey, of what you're in. Because as long as we just continually play for the exit, it gets a real fucked up dynamic in not only how companies grow, but also the personal journey that people have.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things to unpack there. As someone who has successfully exited, what did that look like for you the day of? You sell your business. I don't know if that day, you get money in the bank. What happens that day? And then what happens the next day when you wake up? How are you feeling? What are you going through?
It is immensely stressful. I do remember the day the wire transfer hit my account, and we had a party among the venture capital firm and all of us.
Yeah.
We had this thing at Buckeye in Mill Valley, California. We had a backdoor patio. We had everybody in the company. We were drinking champagne. I looked in the head of the private equity company came over and said, "Look at your bank account." And I got the email and it said, all the transfer had gone through.
Yeah.
And I remember going home crying, not of joy, of just relief and stress, but also uncertainty on what the next part of my life brings. I remember it was one of the few times I stopped at a bar on the way home by myself and had a beer. I come from an alcoholic family, and drinking alone is really kind of a telltale sign of something's wrong here, right? So I just stopped at a bar and had a beer by myself. And on the way, I was just crying. And it was just it was relief, it was happiness, but it was fear. And it was just so much on me at one time. And then I have all this money and all these kinds of things. It all just pounded on me at one time. And if I could do it again, if there was a way to make it more metered, right? Unfortunately, entrepreneurships and the type of people who are attracted to entrepreneurship are very mercurial people.
Yeah.
And if anything, what it's taught me is just this idea of just being metered, not getting too high by the highs and not getting too low by the lows.
Mm.
It's really just trying to keep it in perspective.
Yeah.
Um, but at that point, it all just landed on me, and I'm driving across the Golden Gate Bridge with tears in my eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's, I have not exited, and I don't know many people that have, but I'm sure a lot of their stories might resonate with you, with your story. And so for that entrepreneur, and this is where we're going to back up to the journey part, because I think this is really important as I build my business, and I learn from this as well as other entrepreneurs who might be looking to exit or looking to start a business to exit. Why do you think entrepreneurs have come to this point of starting something to exit? Why do you think that's become so prevalent? And what do you think that is done to the people, to the entrepreneurs that have this mindset, day in and day out grinding to exit? What do you think that does to them? And then again, why do you think this is so
Sure.
prevalent?
Well, the reason why it's so prevalent is obvious. It's the money, right?
Mhm.
Since the in entrepreneurship, the watershed event was the Netscape IPO in 1995 or six, and that showed people that startups can make a tremendous amount of money very quickly. It happened before, but since the dot-com era, people have this idea of exit just because there's so much money attached to it.
Mhm.
But what it has done is it's really skewed the running of a business, especially a technology business, to this grow fast, go big or go home kind of thing. And I think that might work for certain businesses, but even if you see a company like WeWorks, where you and I are operating out of right now, this go big, go fast just kind of killed them. And if they had acted more like a rational, slow-moving business, maybe they wouldn't be in the situation they're in now. I don't know. I think they're going to become a really rational business. But the fact that there's so much money attached to it
Yeah.
makes this exit. And I got to tell you, talk to anybody who's exited. Some people, the money is great, but you wake up the next day, especially if you sell your company and you're not in charge. It's not your baby anymore.
Yeah.
But the one thing I will say about the entrepreneurial journey is very much like people will tell you about having kids. When you have young children, it is incredibly, just devastatingly difficult. But anyone who's a grandparent will look back and say that age when my kid was up to the age of 10 were the best years of my life.
Yeah.
So the idea of how do you enjoy it even though it's hard,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you just enjoy it?
And that is the question. And so I don't have the answer to that question. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are searching for the answers to that question. For me, as I've started to grow this business, and it's grown quickly to my standards, to someone else it's slow moving, but to
Right.
me it's been there has been that stress. The time is it just flies, and there's always so much to do. And I find myself not enjoying the process sometimes. I find myself it becomes more of a burden at times, and other times you get excited, and there's those highs and lows. And so what advice do you have as you've gone through a career of entrepreneurship and experiencing those things? Are there any ways that entrepreneurs can focus more on the journey, and
Yeah.
and if so, how do they do that, and how can they do that for their mental health too?
One of the biggest things that I think that is missing from this whole idea of an entrepreneurial journey is a fucking sense of humor, right? Is this idea that, you know, sometimes things are so bad you just have to laugh it off. And I'm not saying not take it seriously, but this idea of putting it in perspective, right? I used to say to the people at our toy company, I said, we're making toys. We're not like curing cancer here, right? I mean, this is, granted, it has to be safe and it has to be legal, all that kind of stuff, obviously. But, this isn't the end of the world if we lose one account or something like that. There's a sense of perspective and a sense of humor of, shit, that got fucked up. Holy cow. That was like a really good fuck up. That was amazing, impressive, boy, nobody fucked it up like you. I mean, just this, and it's hard to do. And it's easy for me to say now because I don't have that as much pressure as younger people have. But trying to keep some kind of perspective and some kind I mean, it's certainly anyone who comes in a generation, comes from a family from the real world, just go back and look at their life. You know, I was working in factories between my college years because my family had no money and I just needed money for college. And I look back at that and I'm like, I could be doing that, right?
Yeah.
You know, you think about how lucky you are to be even doing whatever you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Rather than doing some shit job, right? Which a lot of people have to do to make a living. So, you know, there's this concept of have a sense of humor and also can put yourself in perspective and, you know, find little blessings and just, you know, be lucky to do what you do. And if you don't, go do something else, right? And then the last thing I'll say about entrepreneurship is expect chaos. Just expect when stuff is really stressful, that say, this is what I signed up for. Michelle Obama was very famous for saying to Barack when he was stressed, she said, hey, you volunteered for this job. No one forced you into this. And so this is the life you sign up for. And it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be stressful. But, you know, you might be fighting the good fight, but it's still a fight.
Yeah, I think that's something that I need to remind myself of a lot is, you know, this is what I signed up for and I don't have to be doing it. And, you know, I am enjoying it and things are going well for me. But for other entrepreneurs out there, it is a choice. You know, every day we have choices, we make those choices. And as you said, reminding ourselves of that perspective and the gratitude for just the ability to have that choice is something that can put it back into perspective.
Right.
For us. So,
Joey, let's also talk about, let's hit for a second this idea of failure versus success. Okay. And this idea of being binary, I'm a failure, I'm a success, is something people talk about. And this is something that all entrepreneurs have to realize. Is that failure is super easy. Everybody is so scared about failing, right? And obviously, you know, in the United States, they say it's a badge of honor to fail, but it really is just devastating, right? But failure in a business is easy, right? Which is, oh shit, that didn't work. You close it down, maybe you owe a little bit of money and you do something else, right? Success is 10 times harder, right? 10 times harder, right? So imagine I start a company and my project, I'll give you a real example. We started Green Toys and our forecast for the first year was $600,000 in business for the first year. We did $1.2 million our first year, okay? That's a problem. I mean, that's hard, right? If we had forecasted 600 and we did 200, that's easy. You're like, oh shit, this isn't working. You shut it down and you go home, right? But success is hard. So understand that while failure and challenge is really hard, success can be 10 times harder. So just plan like, okay, I'm really successful. And that's where the moderation and the measure came in. Luckily, when we started Green Toys, we were in our 40s. We were a little smarter. And we said no to Walmart 7 times. 7 times Walmart said, would you come into us? And we said no, because it wasn't right for us at the time, but also we realized it would be way too much for us.
Yeah.
And I'm dealing with some entrepreneurs at WeWorks Lab today that got pummeled with demand, went out and pushed too hard, didn't meter it, and are struggling, right?
Yeah.
So success is as hard as failure. So, and it's never easy.
Yeah. And I think that brings up an interesting point about what is success in the first place. You know, like you said, if you suddenly get orders for 10 million worth of product and your business implodes trying to get to that point, that's not really success, you know, because the business is going to implode. And so I think it's hard for entrepreneurs at times, especially from a mental health perspective, to compare themselves to other businesses and to figure out what success is and what failure is. You know, as an entrepreneur, it's, you look out there and most of the stories you hear are about, you know, the new IPO, the startup that in 3 years has grown exponentially and is the new, you know, this, that, and the other thing. And you start comparing yourself to them. And so I think kind of shifting gears on what is success and failure is, you know, do entrepreneurs get to the point where they truly see it as a success, or are they still craving for that next thing? Are they still comparing themselves to that next person?
Right.
And for me, that's something that, I think people naturally struggle with comparing themselves to others, but I think in entrepreneurship, it's especially prevalent. And so how do you navigate success and failure in an environment when there's no clear success and there's no clear failure? For a startup that fails, quote unquote, but the founder wasn't made to do that. The founder's happier, no longer in the business, and the founder can move on to something else that is better for him or her. That might be more of a success than a failure. And
Right.
so how do you navigate that? And that's a question that, I don't know the answer to, but in your perspective, how do you navigate success and failure as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. Well, in navigating success or failure, I have to give credit to a particular firm that I did business with. When we wanted to sell our company, we did a business with a firm called Meridian Capital out of Seattle. They're an investment bank. They
Okay.
raise money for companies, and they do sell side consulting to sell the company. And they asked the question of, what's your goal? And we said, well, we want to hit X million dollars in sales. They said, no. What's your goal? What do you want to do with the company? I'm like, well, I want it to be like the global leader. They're like, stop giving me the marketing bullshit. What do you want? And I said, I'm ready for some peace and serenity. I said, that's what I'm looking for. I've struggled all these years. We've got it to this point, and I'm concerned that if we don't, pull the apple off the tree at this point, we'll go for the next one, which is what everybody does, which is I'm here. But boy, I'm X million dollars in sales, but success is really, X times 10, and that's what success says. So I'm going to go up to that. We had a really good advisor, Chuck Wilkie. I'll give him a call out because he was fantastic. He basically said, if this is what you want, it's success to do it at this point. And, I'm not worth $1 billion, but for us, that really clarified for us what is success. Success for us was taking it off the table at that point. And for us, that was really good. And I think that's a hard question, because when you say what's success, people immediately turn to the internet and say, well, success for that company was, success for Jeff Bezos was world domination. I want world domination. And the reality is not everybody's Jeff Bezos, right? Very few people are Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is Jeff Bezos. Joey is Joey and Robert is Robert, right?
Mm-hmm.
So really the question is, what's success to you? This is true from a strategic level and from a tactical level. Every time I work with an entrepreneur and they say, I want to do this, I say, what's the goal? The goal drives the tactics, as opposed to companies that do shit, like do a bunch of shit, get some traction, like, oh, that's my strategy, right? I'm going to sell to Walmart. Oh, Walmart selling to big box is my strategy. Why? Well, because I got a PO from Walmart, right? So there is that point of stopping and saying, what's the goal? And there's no right answer. That's tough, but I think, again, you just have to say, I'm going to do what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I think that hits the nail on the head, because coming back to a mental health perspective, if you're chasing someone else's dream, then you're never going to be satisfied. You're never going to be happy. And so I think that advisor that shared that with you, and now you sharing that with other people is spot on. When someone says, oh, I'm going to build this business because of this, it's like, wait. Let's step back. Is that what you want? What's the goal here? Why are you doing what you're doing? And does that align with the goal? Does that align with your vision? Does it align with your personal vision?
Yeah, then I'll give you a personal example.
Yeah.
When I got into venture capital, I got into it out of, just, happenstance. It was just luck that I got into it through that era. And it was the thing everybody wanted to be in. In Silicon Valley, you wanted to be a venture capitalist. So I'm a Silicon Valley venture capitalist. And then after doing it as a junior partner for 2 or 3 years, I started my own fund. So I went out and raised money, and my ass was on the line for the money. So as I was doing that, I realized to everyone else, this was the ideal situation. I had these big, name brand investors. I had a $35 million fund. It was small and manageable. It was San Francisco. But what I didn't realize is what did I want out of it? And and if the answer is I want money, that is never the right answer, right? Never. So for me, I struggled really hard. The business did well, but I struggled just because it wasn't what I liked to do. It was too much stress, other people's money. I wasn't close enough to the business. I was not operating the business. My fortunes were tied to the efforts of others, which is something I did not like because I'm much more of a manifest destiny kind of guy. And there was no right or wrong, but you saw this at the time that being a Silicon Valley venture capitalist was the epitome, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, A, I didn't like it. And B, I wanted to go earn my stripes before I did it. So that's when I got out of it and went back to it. So, but again, this idea of success was that you should want to be this. This is awesome. And that's a hard thing to stop, but I think you just got to stop the comparisons.
Yeah. And then that's a great example. That's a great story. What about from the failure side? Let's try to bring it both ways of in your life, something that externally might have looked like a failure. And maybe internally you thought it was a failure at first because you were comparing yourself to those other people. And maybe after learning from it, maybe it wasn't that much of a failure. Is there anything that you can think of in your life that sort of resonates with that?
Sure. Let me go back to what in my younger years when I was in my 30s. So I moved to Los Angeles. I was a musician for a long time, and I was just enamored by the record industry. I was into rock and roll, and I really wanted to do that. So my goal was always to work at a record company, to be at one of the major record companies. So I got a job after trying for many years at Geffen Records, David Geffen's company. Mm-hmm. And this was the epitome. I mean, this was the early 90s. It was Nirvana and Peter Gabriel and Counting Crows and Guns N' Roses. This was the hot place to work. And my job was, because I came from printing and graphics, I was responsible for all the album covers and the posters, anything that got printed. It was kind of a dream situation, right? And I did not do well at it. I think I did well, but I didn't personally thrive because it's a very cutthroat environment, extremely cutthroat environment, and you had to be really tough. And at the time, I was not a particularly tough person. I don't think I'm a particularly tough person now, but at the time, I was not that tough. And I saw it as a personal failure. I saw it as cowardness in myself, And this all stems from, I came from a household that was incredibly abusive. So this idea of toughness and standing up to bullies and stuff was all just fucked up in my mind. So I go to this really combative, confrontational environment, and I saw myself as just a failure. The fact that I can't swim with the sharks. And then it was only 10 years later that I realized that industry was completely fucked up. I mean, look where the record industry is now, right? The music industry is half of what its revenues were at its peak because it could change. And I was trying to push change in there. I was in charge of technology. Interestingly enough, I started what was one of the first entertainment companies on the web when we went on the web in '94. And we actually did the first digital release of music on Geffen on CompuServe in 1994. You can search the web and you can find it. And it's also on my website. But I saw myself as such a failure. I'm a coward. I was mid-level management. I wasn't moving up. But I realized that this is a weird environment. Mm-hmm. I met I'll tell a second story that's related to that.
Yeah.
I met a woman who from Illinois who got elected to Congress. And she went to Congress, and her first reaction of, oh my God, how did I get here? How did I get here? 2 years later, she looked around and said, holy shit, how did they get here? Right? So there's always this idea that I'm not worthy, right? Yeah. Which is a very typical thing. But what you see as failure might be failure, but it might also be an observation you're having of just a bad fit.
Yeah. And I think that's totally fair. And I think that's something that I personally struggle with of, if something's a bad fit and I'm personally failing at it, whatever it is, I forget to take a step back and think, okay, does this really align with what I want anyway? And maybe it doesn't, maybe it does. And maybe it is a failure. That's something I need to learn from and get better at. But maybe it's like, hey, this is just in the whole different ballpark. why was I chasing this goal dream in the first place? The fact that I'm quote unquote failing at it isn't necessarily a failure, because it's not the time, space, environment that I should be in right now.
Especially in these glamorous positions, like when you go into Los Angeles, which is the entertainment industry everybody wants to go into, or if you go into technology, you're at the hot startup, right? Those kind of things. And you get there and you're like, why isn't this good? It's only because you went there for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And so failure tends either failure is you just can't do it. I mean, in some cases you do just fuck up. You don't put enough effort in, you don't try hard enough, any of those kinds of things. But a lot of times it's just you're doing something because you think you should, and that's the wrong reason to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we all do it. But
I do it. I do it all the time. And it's something that is the fact that at least we're aware of it is the first step, and then moving from there. I think we got a ton of really, really, really valuable stuff so far. I just want to finish with opening it up to you about anything entrepreneurship and mental health related, anything that you'd like to share with the folks listening, in your own experience, that you're thinking about for your future, that you think could be valuable to the people listening.
So I'll do my advice for entrepreneurs in a very concise kind of way.
Okay.
The best thing I can say for entrepreneurs that I've learned through my 30 years of experience is stay cool. Keep it together, weather the storm, and really try to stay on an even keel. B, stay healthy. I was a partier when I was really young, and it's shocked me how much being healthy helps you to navigate the problem, right? And the third is focus on relationships, focus on people. Happiness comes from your relationship to people, not your relationship to fame or money or material possessions. Focus on the people and the people that bring joy and meaning to your life. And I think when you do those three, you are as far along as you can be to being happy in an entrepreneurial venture.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay, great. And I want to finish with giving you the opportunity to share where people can connect with you, especially those folks in Portland that might need some investment help with your new startup. So sharing where people can connect with you at, your website, any social media that you have. If you don't, no big deal. And then also your startup's website as well.
Sure. So I now run a very small boutique venture capital fund in Portland called Starter Fluid. It's on the web at www.starterfluid.com. Our mission is to work with very, very early stage physical products companies. And our goal is to take companies from the maker space to the full-fledged CPG, consumer products goods company, by giving them just a little bit of money to build inventory and helping them go through just the production and sales forecasting that a maker needs to be able to get to become a CPG company. I've been down that road and I know how to do it. And hopefully in Portland, I can help some young entrepreneurs build these products companies into something that's really great. So It's www.starterfluid.com.
Great. And I'll make sure we post that in all the show notes and on the website and everything so that people can get access to that.
Joey, let me add also that I think that, let me just say that I think the podcast that you're providing is something that is incredibly unique and is also something that's really needed. The discussion of entrepreneurship and the human aspect of entrepreneurship is something that really isn't discussed that much. So I want to congratulate you and thank you for doing this. I think you're doing a real service to the community.
Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you so much.